My name is Mark, and for most of my life I believed I was the kind of man who understood exactly who he was and where he belonged. A man rooted in routine, loyalty, and the quiet pride that comes from building a life with the same person year after year, a man who found meaning in simple rituals like early mornings, honest work, and the traditions that kept my marriage steady and predictable. And nothing represented that more than the first weekend of November, the opening of deer season, which for me wasn't just about hunting, but about escaping the noise of the world and returning to a version of myself that felt calm and grounded, usually with my wife Lisa by my side in our remote cabin deep in the Missouri woods, a place we had slowly shaped over more than a decade into something that felt like a second home, a sanctuary carved out of tree silence and shared memories. But that year everything shifted in a way I never expected. Because Lisa told me she wouldn't be coming, that she had been chosen for an important educational conference at the state capitol, something she had worked hard for and deserved. And while I was proud of her, the idea of spending my birthday weekend alone after my recent heart scare made her uneasy. So uneasy that she insisted I shouldn't go by myself. And that's how Chloe entered the picture, Lisa's colleague, younger, recently divorced. Someone I had only met briefly at school events, always polite, always smiling, with an energy that felt out of place in my quiet, structured world. And before I could properly process it, Lisa had arranged for Chloe to come with me, framing it as something practical and harmless, a way for me not to be alone and for Chloe to experience something new. And I told myself that was all it was: practical, harmless, innocent. Even though deep down I already felt the discomfort of bringing another woman into a space that had always belonged only to my wife and me. And when I pulled into Chloe's driveway that Friday evening and saw her come out with too many bags and that bright, effortless smile, I felt something shift inside me. Not attraction exactly, but awareness, a reminder that I was not as emotionally numb as I liked to believe. And during the drive, she filled the silence with stories about her life, her divorce, her struggles and hopes. And I found myself listening more closely than I intended, not because of what she said, but because of how open she was, how alive she sounded. Like someone still discovering herself, while I felt like someone who had stopped questioning anything years ago. And by the time we reached the cabin and settled in, the fire lit, the cold pushed back, the atmosphere already felt different. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. And that unfamiliarity followed me through the night. Through the small moments, her laughter echoing in the loft, the way her presence filled the space with movement and sound. And I kept reminding myself that this was temporary, just a weekend, just a favor, just two adults sharing a cabin for practical reasons. And yet I couldn't ignore how aware I had become of her, not in a physical sense at first, but in an emotional one, noticing her moods, her tone, her curiosity about my life. And the next morning, that awareness only grew stronger when we prepared for the hunt, moving together through the quiet forest, the cold air, the crunch of leaves, the shared focus, and then sitting side by side in the hunting blind, wrapped in silence and anticipation, the world narrowed down to just the two of us and the rhythm of breathing. And in that stillness, something subtle but dangerous began to happen, because conversations became softer, eye contact lasted longer, and the line between casual companionship and emotional intimacy started to blur without either of us naming it. And when she spoke about loneliness, about how strange it felt to rebuild life after divorce, I found myself responding with an honesty I rarely used even with my wife, talking about routine, about feeling stuck, about how life becomes predictable in ways that feel safe but also empty. And I realized with a quiet shock that Chloe wasn't just listening, she was understanding, reflecting back parts of myself I hadn't acknowledged in years. And that connection, that feeling of being seen without expectations, without history, created a tension more powerful than anything physical, a tension made of shared vulnerability and unsaid emotions. And when our hands brushed accidentally, when our shoulders touched in the confined space, it felt charged, not because of desire alone, but because of meaning. Because suddenly this wasn't just about proximity, it was about recognition. And when she finally looked at me and said softly that she was glad it was me she was here with, that she felt safe, something inside me cracked. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, quiet way that scared me more. Because I knew exactly what was happening, and yet I didn't stop it. I let myself lean into the moment emotionally, into the connection, into the feeling of being needed in a way that wasn't about responsibility or duty, And when the boundaries finally dissolved, it wasn't driven by impulse but by exhaustion, by years of emotional restraint collapsing into a single fragile moment where we both admitted without words that we were filling spaces in each other that had been empty for too long. And even when I pulled back, even when guilt flooded in and I said it wasn't right, I could hear how weak my own voice sounded because part of me didn't want to go back to who I had been before that moment. And the rest of the day passed in a strange emotional haze filled with silence that wasn't awkward but heavy loaded with everything we now knew and couldn't undo. And back at the cabin that evening, sitting across from each other with the fire between us, reality finally caught up with fantasy because the warmth of connection was replaced by the cold weight of consequence, and we talked not dramatically, not angrily, but honestly admitting that what we felt was real but also unsustainable. That it existed in a bubble created by isolation, vulnerability, and timing, and that outside this weekend there were real lives, real commitments, real people who would be hurt. And when she asked me if I regretted it, I realized regret was not a simple word, because I regretted the betrayal, the risk, the potential damage, but I didn't regret the emotional awakening itself, the reminder that I was still capable of feeling deeply, of connecting, of wanting more from life than just routine. And that realization frightened me more than anything else, because it meant the problem wasn't Chloe, it was me. The quiet dissatisfaction I had never voiced, the emotional distance I had normalized. And when she went up to the loft and I sat alone by the dying fire, I understood that this weekend hadn't been a mistake in the way accidents are mistakes. It had been a mirror showing me parts of myself I had ignored for years. And while I promised myself it would end there, that I would return to my marriage and my life and bury this moment as something temporary and unreal, I also knew that something irreversible had already happened. Not an affair in the physical sense, but a shift in awareness. A crack in the version of myself I thought was complete. And from that point on, every November, every time I return to that cabin, I don't just think about hunting season. I think about how easily a man can cross emotional boundaries without realizing it. How temptation is rarely loud or dramatic, but often arrives quietly in the form of understanding, shared loneliness, and the dangerous comfort of being truly seen.